Welcome to the LSU NCBRT Preparedness Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Markle. I am a curriculum development specialist here at NCBRT, and I work in collaboration with subject matter experts to create valuable and timely training for the responder community. The National Center for Biomedical Research and Training provides mobile training to both the national and international emergency response community. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we're talking to Rob Allen and Mark DuPont about what current trends show us about securing faith-based organizations against threats. So to start us off today, what are some of the current trends in the threats facing faith-based organizations, and are there new types of threats emerging that organizations need to be aware of?
Well, I'm going to say something. We haven't talked about this beforehand, Rob, but I don't think they're necessarily new threats. I think they're just threats that have gotten more attention. And I think, there's multiple federal agency studies specific to faith-based organizations. The CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, looked at things that have happened in the past and looked over events that have happened in churches or other types of faith-based organizations. And Rob had mentioned this in our previous podcast, but of those incidents, about 25% of them were spillover from a domestic that is now transferred into where these people either went to church or worshiped in their synagogue, whatever their religion was. And the point being that these violent acts were between people that had some relationship with the church, its members, its employees, or each other. And my point is that's been going on since man was made, those types of events and spilling over into whether it be a church or whether it be a place of work where the two individuals work, or a school where the kids go to school. Those types of things are relatively common. I just think that the issue right now, given what we've got going on, whether it be politically, whether it be what's going on in Israel, those things have been heightened and escalated a little bit, so they're brought to the top. What are your thoughts, Rob?
I'm sort of in a unique position serving the Jewish community, and my caseload has increased by about 180% since October 7th, the attack on Israel by Hamas and subsequent response by Israel. But I think you're absolutely right that whatever the issues, political issues, domestic issues, have always been imposed a challenge to the security and safety at religious institutions, because so often people identify whatever their particular grievance is about something that's happening with a faith and believe that religion is behind whatever the issue of the day is. We had a ton of anti-Semitic material being put out saying that, every single, I think the headline was, every single aspect of COVID is Jewish, and there was a conspiracy committed by Jewish people. We have seen anti-Semitic attacks that say every single element of immigration is because the Jews are behind it, and LGBTQIA rights is Jewish, and so forth. And we've had churches who have been targeted because of their stance on abortion, on immigration rights, on LGBTQIA issues. And as you said, in an overheated political environment, the threat of people focusing their anger and their grievance on faith-based organizations just increases dramatically.
Yeah, and I think if you go through back in history, I guess my point, and maybe I didn't articulate, obviously things have escalated right at this moment in time because of those things that are going on. But if you go back in history, there's always been a tinderbox. There's always been something that ignited whatever it is. Let's go all the way back to 9/11. There was a belief that, Jews weren't at work that day. So therefore they had something to do with that. So, pick a time in our history, and somehow, some way, there's been a connection to faith-based organizations, and there's been an escalation of the attention of those groups and or crimes committed against those groups. So I think my point being is I think it's been there. Right now, we're on the stove and the pot is boiling, and there's a lot of events that are going on around us. And I think the other thing, Rob, that exacerbates that is that these events are going on at the same time. So you have the political issues and unrest and division. You have the obviously the events going on in Israel. You have you put the pandemic. Let's throw that into the pot and stir that around a little bit. And I really think these are unique times in that sense, that you have all these things boiling at the same time.
But to your point, Mark, in Civil War times, people attack religious institutions on both sides of the Civil War, blaming them for either fighting slavery or not fighting slavery, and allowing the Confederacy to reign. So you're absolutely correct that this has been going on for hundreds of years in this country. And by the way, not only here. Interestingly, on October 7th, I was on vacation. I was in Barcelona, in the Gothic section of Barcelona, getting a tour of the Gothic site. And before I knew that the attacks had happened, our tour guide was pointing out, saying, do you know what this building is? And it looked like every other building in the Gothic section. And I said, no. And she said, it's a crime that you don't know that. It's a crime that people in Barcelona don't know this. This was the Central Synagogue in Barcelona. But all the Jews were kicked out in 1391, and in a pogrom, and in 1492 it happened again, and this has been going on forever. And we need to, reclaim the identity. And there were certainly things going on, the Spanish Inquisition and churches and all those types of things.
The Crusades.
We're talking hundreds of years of history in religious institutions being targeted.
Yeah, and I'm sure also the increased digital presence of faith-based organizations and all organizations plays a role in that. So can you talk a little bit more about how that digital presence and cybersecurity becomes a pressing issue, and maybe some of the steps that organizations should take to protect themselves?
Well, I don't know if faith-based organizations are there. I mean, there may be a few that don't have a digital presence, but they're very few. And so the risk associated with digital technology is very high. I have not made it through a week in my current job without receiving a report of smishing or phishing. People trying to get access to the synagogue servers, and a couple. I mean, common scams are they impersonate a rabbi and say, "Hey, this is Rabbi, Jones. I can't talk on the phone right now, but I need you to give me some gift cards for a sick congregant, and so send me the gift card numbers." And it happens on a regular basis, and other attempts. Sometimes faith-based organizations are not as sophisticated as they should be, and they're guarding some very confidential, personally identifiable information, such as if people are tithing or paying offering, or the church or synagogue or temple or mosque may be holding credit card information on its congregants and that type of stuff. And so they have to be they have to follow the same protocols as everybody else. But it's a volunteer who knows a guy who said, "Hey, can you set this up for us?" sometimes. And as a result, they don't have the level of sophistication in protecting their cyber infrastructure as they should. The other thing that happens too is, as a result of the pandemic, a lot of places went to sort of online services over Zoom, and we had Zoom bombings. People sort of terrorizing is maybe overstating it, but showing up on Zoom meetings, disrupting services at faith-based organizations.
I think that you touched upon a key point here, Rob. More often than not, let me back up. Let me set the stage here. There are mega churches out there that have thousands of congregants, and typically they're more advanced in their digital footprint and their digital use of digital technology. And so they usually have people full time that will manage their website and manage their ability to communicate with their congregants through digital tools. But the vast majority, the number of those churches is minimal. There's a big pyramid out there, and there's a lot of those other churches that are underneath that are, again, in your rural communities. And typically, Rob, you hit it right on the head. Hey, does someone know how to do this? Oh, Johnny's cousin Phil knows how to do that. Great. So let's have him do that. And they do the best, but their vulnerability, there is a gaping hole in how they store that information that Rob alluded to. And the problem here is that the bad guys that want to do harm, that are looking for ways to make money, look at that particular audience and go, ripe for the taking. Penetrating those types of networks within a church environment is relatively easy because they haven't, literally things like they haven't updated their software in 5 years. And so there's very old legacy software that they're using to do their website, to do their outreach to that was one of the first things I discovered in developing security plans for the church in Tallahassee, is how old some of the software was that they used just to manage their membership. And it literally was outdated. You couldn't even contact the software company anymore, but no one knew how to use anything else. And that's the only one they knew how to use. So let's just stick with that. So that, and this has nothing to do with ideology. This has nothing to do with race this is all about greed and money. And there's opportunities there in the digital landscape to take advantage of some of these institutions. Again, because they just don't think about it. They don't think about it happening to their church. And again, you're talking about these small rural communities, people that have been a member of that particular church or faith-based organization for 30, 40 years. They just don't think about those types of things.
And I will point out that the majority of phishing, smishing, and other cyber attacks are not U.S. based.
Right.
This is coming from people based in foreign countries, or possibly using VPNs that indicate they're from a foreign country, but more than likely they actually are in foreign countries.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing, Rob, that you mentioned about, events taking place on Zoom and with COVID, and I know a lot of that has continued even as we kind of, COVID's become more normalized and is not as big of a threat. I'm sure that's also a concern that, a bad actor is using that kind of thing for, surveillance as they're planning an attack as well. Able to see how many people congregate in this area, what part of the building it's in, or things like that as well.
Yeah, one of the pieces of security consulting we do is we look at what they broadcast and suggest camera angles and other things to prevent security either lapses or strengths being shown, so that they're focusing the cameras on the essential parts of the service without giving hints as to what potential vulnerabilities exist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and again, we point to the pandemic, so that interesting that we're talking about that. The thing that thrust many of these rural community institutions into the digital age was the pandemic. So they realized, okay, we've got to have an online presence here. We've got to maybe broadcast our services. So how do we do that? And that really, I mean, joking aside here, that really was, hey, Billy's cousin Joey, knows how to do that, and that's who comes in and sets up that opportunity there. As I said previously, there's about 350 to 400,000 faith-based institutions in the United States, and only about 1,800 of them are what we call, mega churches that, again, have thousands of congregations that are large, usually in large sections of the community, and have a lot of full-time type assets to protect themselves, or at least be aware of these types of things. That is a lot of other organizations that's left out there that is ripe for the picking for those people that recognize that this is an opportunity.
Absolutely. So how are faith-based organizations adapting their community engagement strategies to address these current trends and issues in safety and security?
I mean, I think training is a big part of it, and a lot of the work that I do is with training. So we try and get every institution that we serve to do run, hide, fight training. Our schools in the community are required to do a certain number of lockdown drills per year, but congregations typically have been a little reluctant to do it, because that's not what you're supposed to be thinking about when you're attending services. You're supposed to be thinking about sort of large philosophical issues, not what to do if something bad happens. But we as a result of a horrible fire in the 1950s, we do fire drills with kids all the time, and as a result, we haven't lost kids in a fire in school in 70 years, I think, something like that. So it's because we practice and we talk about that. Again, the chances of anything happening at this particular institution are infinitesimal, but the chances of something bad happening at an institution are sadly fairly high. So let's train everyone so that, when something happens at an institution, it happens at an institution where people are trained to respond. That's sort of the philosophy behind our run, hide, fight. We also do more advanced training for security professionals. We do BTER, behavioral threat evaluation response course for a lot of our security professionals. And then we do a lot of training for ushers and greeters. And the training that we do focuses on de-escalation, because people sometimes show up at our institutions who are living with a mental illness, or they are upset and agitated about something occurring in their lives, and they're in a very heightened sense of emotion. And if you don't know how to respond to those people, the situation's going to get worse. So how do we de-escalate people in those situations? We actually use the same crisis intervention team trainers who train police officers to reduce lethality in encounters that they're having with people, and firefighters, and they train EMTs and dispatchers. Now they're training our ushers and greeters. And you talk about community engagement. The one that we did just a couple of days ago was, we sponsored it along with an Episcopal church. And the reason that we do that is because there's strength in faith-based communities coming together for the training. The threats are essentially the same. The ideology behind the threats may not be the same, but how you respond to them is the same. And so there's value in having organizations work together to address those threats, particularly if they're geographically adjacent. And so, one of the best relationships between any two organizations anywhere that I've seen in my community is between a synagogue and the Catholic high school across the street. They're each other's refuge. If something bad, power goes out, or they had a lockdown situation and need to move people, they move from one institution to the other. And they share parking because, synagogues busy at different times and the high school's busy, and so they share parking facilities. It's a phenomenal relationship, and the degree to which we can share those assets is incredibly valuable.
Yeah, I would emphasize that and echo what Rob just said. We too in Tallahassee, so the church that I did the security work for, as I've said before, was the largest campus on any given Sunday. But right next to us was a synagogue, and a great relationship. Literally, they would have events, they'd use our parking lot, would have events, would use their parking lot. Also communication and being aware, right? Hey, we're seeing this, or we got this particular threat. They would share it with us just to say, again, we don't know if it's just because of where we are. And if it's because of where we are, then guess what? You're standing right next to us, and the threat could be to you as well. So I think to answer the question about what they're doing in response to this, I think the number one thing they're doing is increasing awareness. I think they could do better in the training. I think that tightrope that they walk in, not wanting necessarily to do all the things that might be necessary because they think that infringes on that environment that they're trying to create for their constituents. I think that's a tightrope that they continue to walk, and being more aware opens their minds a little bit to thinking, okay, you know what, that run, hide, fight training might be a good thing for us to do. And again, it's communication. The two things I had noted when you asked the question were awareness and unity. Be aware of what's there so that as you start thinking about what to do, you're opening your mind and your thoughts to what can we reach out to. There's a lot of resources on the federal side focused on faith-based organizations and providing some resources there. But really, it all boils down to what's at the community level. Who is my next door neighbor? What are they doing, and how can we work together? Back to the church in Tallahassee, what they're doing now, and I was invited back. I live in West Palm Beach now, so I'm a little further away, but they invited me back for this exercise, kind of a capstone, if you will. What they've done is reached out to other faith-based organizations in the city and said, hey, we're doing this. And if you don't want to do it at your facility, or you just want some people within your congregation to be aware of this and be exposed to this, come in and we'll train anybody that walks through the door. And what that has really turned into is increasing that awareness within other churches. So people, light bulb goes off, hey, we don't do anything like this. Let's go to them and ask for guidance on how we do this and who we should reach out to. So it's become a good model, if you will, of what can be done. But awareness and unity not only extends to your neighbors, but your public safety community as well. Reaching out to them, because a lot of these sheriff's departments and police departments have resources that they can provide to you to make you more aware of where your vulnerabilities may be and begin the process. So those are my two focal points, awareness and unity.
And then the other thing I would just add is that there are things that collectives of faith-based organizations can do to sort of pool resources and address that no individual institution would be able to do. So, for example, we do an intelligence bulletin that goes out to all our constituents, as well as, by the way, the head of security for the Archdiocese and the Episcopal Church, and an organization of several mosques in the community as well, where we share, hey, these are the things we're sort of concerned about. That goes out every week. No individual institution is capable of producing that, but collectively we can. We do security patrols for all our institutions on a regular basis. And again, no one institution could probably afford that, but all the institutions working together could. So those are some of the things that we do as well collectively.
Thank you. That's about all we have for this part. Thank you to Rob and Mark for joining us today. Next time, we'll wrap up this series with a discussion of some of the unique challenges faith-based organizations face when it comes to safety and security. So thank you. If you have any questions or topic suggestions for future episodes, please send us an email at podcast@ncbrt.lsu.edu. Make sure you subscribe to the LSU NCBRT Preparedness Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts.